let's get going on today's class. So what we're going to be doing today is we are going to wrap up our look at rule-governed behavior. We introduced it last time, took a look at some of the advantages. We're going to finish off with the disadvantages and then also take a look at a special form of rule-governed behavior known as personal process rules. And then we are going to go into chapter 12, which is biological dispositions in learning. Basically, little idiosyncrasies that have a biological basis that affect how individuals can learn. So that's what we're going to do in the second half. But again, before we get there, we're going to wrap up rule-governed behavior, quick little recap of the advantages to rule-governed behavior before we take a look at the disadvantages. And then we're going to take a look at the personal rules in self-regulation. So how do we regulate our own behavior using personal rules? And we'll see what that is based on, as well as a way to increase your willpower and your effectiveness in controlling your own behavior. So last time we introduced the idea of rule-governed behaviors. It is based on the idea of a rule, and psychologically, in the psychological world, a rule is a verbal description of a contingency that basically says, in this situation, if you do this, then this will occur. So if you tell somebody, in this situation, if you do this, then this will occur, that is an example of a rule. And if they change their behavior because of that, that's an example of rule-governed behavior. And as we mentioned, the biggest advantage of rule-governed behavior is the very rapid establishment of these appropriate patterns of behavior. So we went with an extreme example last time. Let's go with something a little bit less extreme. Let's say that you are learning how to interact at a professional conference, and you want to know how to correctly greet somebody at a professional conference. It is quite possible for you to go to that professional conference and just through the natural contingencies, learn how to correctly greet somebody. So you go up to somebody and you say, you walk up to them and you slap them on the butt and you say, "What up, yo?" And they basically never talk to you again and blackball you from that particular area of psychology. That would be a punishment contingency. And if you keep doing stuff, eventually you're going to understand that you say, "Hello, my name is," and you shake their hand and you look them in the eye. It would take you many, many trials to get to the point where you were like, "Oh, you know what, I think saying hello, saying my name, shaking their hand and looking them in the eye, that's the correct way to do it." That would probably take you years to get to on your own. Or you can ask a supervisor and say, "What do I do when I walk up to somebody at a conference?" And they would say, "Oh, well, you say hello. In that situation, you do this. You say hello, you introduce yourself, you shake them, shake their hand, you look them in the eye, and then that will lead to a positive social interaction." So very quickly, without even trying any attempts, any failures, you can get a very quick understanding of the behavior. So that's the main advantage. The disadvantage, the one that we, two of them that we looked at, first off is the fact that rules have an advantage in acquisition. They allow you to learn how to do something very quickly. Natural contingencies, though, are actually better at performance. Natural contingencies more quickly allow you to do something, learn how to do something, rather than just learn the steps. So this is the difference between reading about a sport and actually playing a sport. This is why the greatest athletes in the world are the ones that put in years and years of actual practice doing their sport, rather than years and years of reading about their sport. So you can find somebody who's an expert at basketball because they have read everything about basketball, they know all the strategies, they know all the skills, they know everything, they have acquired all that information. But their performance is not going to be very high if they've never played with a basketball. So they might know exactly what you're supposed to do, which is the acquisition, but they'll be bad at actually doing it, which is the performance. So that's another disadvantage of rule-governed behavior. It's great at acquisition, it's poor at the performance side. And then the last disadvantage that we mentioned, and we gave one example, I'll give you one more today, because this one is becoming much more important in our society today because of the rapid change that is occurring, or changes that are occurring in our society. We now live in a society, because of the spread of information, because of the power of social media, where the contingencies in our society are changing all the time at a very rapid rate. So that highlights another disadvantage of rule-governed behavior, and that is that oftentimes the rule that is stated is actually wrong. It's actually insensitive to the natural contingencies. It's not a true statement of what the actual rule is. It's what they think the correct rule is, but it doesn't match up with the actual rule that is in place, the actual contingency that is in place. And the example that we saw last time, the dramatic example, has to do with the Me Too movement. So the Me Too movement represents a shift in the actual contingencies that are in operation in our society. So it used to be the old rules, the old contingencies, for example, used to be that in Hollywood, if you sexually harass, then you get gratification. That used to be the old rules. Used to be the old rules that in Hollywood, if you sexually harass, then nothing will happen. Those were the old rules. And this is a verbal description of a contingency. This is rule-governed behavior. Those old rules are no longer the case, because now Weinstein is on trial for sexual assault. So these rules that he was operating under are no longer the case. These rules were insensitive to the actual contingencies, because sometime between when he learned the contingencies and when he last enacted these, the rules changed. Something changed and the rules were insensitive about that. We saw the flip side of this with Rose McGowan. So Rose McGowan, for the longest time, was living under the stated rule that in Hollywood, if you accuse a powerful person, no one will believe you. And that rule is no longer in effect. That rule is insensitive to the actual contingency now, which is to believe women. And you'll see the hashtags, you'll see the support for this throughout society. So the rules have changed, and the old rules were insensitive to the actual contingencies. So that was the example that we ended with. I'll give you one more, just again to kind of illustrate this, this tendency now for the stated rules to be insensitive and for the actual contingencies to change. So this one has to do with trans individuals, and it has to do with trans individuals' representation in media, and specifically who can be hired to play a trans character. So there are rules in our society in terms of who can be hired and what the reaction will be. And this is a rule that has very, very clearly changed, because if you kind of take a look at the history of this, and I'm not going to come out one side or the other on this because that's an entire other TED Talk, but if you want to take a look at the history of this, Boys Don't Cry. This movie came out in 1999. This starred Hilary Swank, and she played a trans individual in this movie. And this was 1999. She got critical acclaim. She won an Oscar. This is one of her 2 Oscars. So she won an Oscar for playing a trans individual. A non-trans actor playing a trans individual, if you do that in this situation in Hollywood, if you are a non-trans actor playing a trans individual, you will win an Oscar. That was the contingency. 2013, we have Dallas Buyers Club. And in this one, Jared Leto played a trans individual, and Jared Leto won an Oscar doing it. So once again, you have the contingency that you're a non-trans actor playing a trans individual. If in Hollywood, in that situation, you're a non-trans actor playing a trans individual, you will win an Oscar. 2013. Somewhere between 2013 and 2017, that rule changed. That natural contingency changed. And unfortunately, nobody told Scarlett Johansson, because Scarlett Johansson signed on to play a trans individual in a biopic about, I think it was somebody who was running they were like a pornography mogul in New York, like back in the 70s, but they were a trans individual. So she was under the impression, she was under the rule-governed behavior that if you're a non-trans individual and you play a trans individual, then you will win an Oscar. And she didn't. She got backlash. In fact, she got so much backlash that she pulled out of the project. So somewhere between 1999, so in 1999, the contingency was in place. In 2013, the contingency was in place, but sometime between 2013 and 2017, I think was when this occurred, the contingency changed. And the rule governed behavior was insensitive, because I am sure that Scarlett Johansson probably went to her agent, probably went to other people and said, what's the rule here? What should I do? And they said, oh, well, guess what? If you're a non-trans person and you play a trans individual, you're going to win an Oscar. That's the rule. And it was insensitive to the current contingencies that were out there. So that's one of the big disadvantages of rule-governed behaviors. You might learn a particular behavior and then all of a sudden realize that that is not the correct behavior. All right, any questions about rule-governed behaviors and the disadvantages? All right, so let's take a look at how to actually use rule-governed behaviors, and this will be great in about 27 days when everybody's making their New Year's resolutions. So if you want your New Year's resolution to stick, this information might come in quite handy. So, and is anybody else kind of weirded out that we're ending a decade? We're going into the 20s? Yeah. I saw a tweet and it goes, what are you going to do with the last 31 days of your decade? And I was like, what? This can't be. It's only 2019. All right. So this all has to do with personal rules. And what a personal rule is, it's a verbal description of contingencies that we basically put on ourselves, right? So these are things that we say to influence our own behavior. They're sort of like the rules you live by in order to maintain or influence your own behavior. So a personal rule in general are the rules you make to influence your own behavior. A personal process rule is a specific form of a personal rule. So it's a personal rule with some extra added features to it. And the extra added features is that it specifically specifies when the action is going to take place, where the action is going to take place, and how that goal is actually going to be accomplished. So a personal rule is just, again, that general description of a contingency you use to try to influence your behavior. They are not very effective. A personal process rule is much more effective. So when you specify in your contingency, this is when it's going to happen, this is where it's going to happen, and this is how it's going to happen, and what it means to accomplish a goal, those become more effective rules. And if you use what are called bright boundaries, then that is when your personal process rule becomes the most effective. So let's take an example of this. We'll back up all the way back to just personal rules. All right. So we got New Year's coming up. We got New Year's resolutions coming up, and one of the biggest New Year's resolutions in our culture is to get fit. Right. Gym membership skyrockets in January, and experienced fitness enthusiasts know that you try to make other plans in January because there's going to be a lineup for whatever machine you want, whatever class you want to get into, right? So anyways, let's say that is your going to be your New Year's resolution, and you are going to make a rule in terms of getting to your New Year's resolution, and you say to yourself, you're going to make it a contingency, so you're going to get yourself a reward, and your reward is going to be a new wardrobe, right? You're going to buy yourself new clothes, new wardrobe once you attain your goal. A personal rule would be something like, in the new year, in that situation, if I get fit, I'm going to buy myself a wardrobe, right? And that's literally saying, in this situation, in the new year, if I do this behavior, if I get fit, I'm going to buy myself a wardrobe. And even though that's a personal rule, it's very ineffective. And it's ineffective because it's too general, it's too ambiguous. It's not a personal process rule. And a personal process rule will be the same general rule, but it'll specify when, where, and how a goal is going to be accomplished. So it'll say something like, in the new year, starting January 3rd, right? Because you need the day after, maybe one more day to recover. But anyways, starting January 3rd, right? The when. 3 days a week, right? The when. I'm going to go to the YMCA, Riverside YMCA, the where. And I am going to the how. I am going to do 3 body pump classes a week, right? That's the how. So that is the when, the where, and the how a goal is to be accomplished. And I kind of jumped the gun on this. If you specify the when, the where, and the how, and you use what's known as a bright boundary, it's going to be the most effective way to regulate your own behavior. And what a bright boundary is, it's when you can exactly tell whether you've reached a criteria or you haven't reached a criteria. So if you say something like, in the new year, I'm going to work out a lot, right? When have you reached a lot? It's very difficult to tell when you've successfully reached a lot or when you've not reached a lot. If you say every week I'm going to work out a lot. This week, have you worked out a lot? Have you not worked out a lot? It's not a bright boundary. It's a very fuzzy boundary. But if you say something like, every week I'm going to work out 3 times during the week for half an hour each time, that is a bright boundary, because it is very easy to know whether you've met or not met that boundary. So if you've worked 2 times out, if you worked out 2 times this week, you haven't met the boundary yet. If you worked out 3 times, you have success. If you worked out 3 times, but only for 15 minutes each time, no success. 3 times and 30 minutes each time, success. So that bright boundary are those kind of exact criteria. So again, if you if you say things like how the goal is to be accomplished, what the goal actually is. So in order to earn that wardrobe, getting fit. What does getting fit mean? Who knows? It could mean different things to different people. I remember reading an article that said one indicator of health, one kind of general indicator of health, is if your height is more than twice your waist circumference. Right? That's kind of like a general indicator. If you're on the other side of that, you're more likely to have health issues. If you're on the other side of that, you're less likely to have health issues. That's a bright boundary. You can measure how tall you are. You can measure how much your waist is. Kind of sucking in my stomach right now as we say this. You can measure those, and you can say, oh, I have met my goal, or I have not met my goal. I'm not quite there. But you know when you've met the goal. If your goal is to just get fit, I shouldn't say just get fit. If your goal is to get fit, when have you gotten fit? When can you wake up in the morning and say, you know what? Yesterday I wasn't fit, but today I'm fit. I've made it. You can't, because get fit's not a bright boundary. So if you are going to make a New Year's resolution this year, make it a personal process rule. Say specifically when you're going to do the behavior, where you're going to do the behavior, and exactly how that behavior is going to be accomplished, and then use that bright boundary. Make sure that all of those are bright boundaries. Not go to the gym, go to this specific gym. Not work out a lot, work out for this much time, work out this many times a week. Not get fit, but be able to, whatever the goal might be, run 1,000 meters in 2 minutes. I don't know what the goal might be, but make it a bright boundary, something that you know when you've reached it. All right, any questions about the personal process rules? All right, so again, these are the ones that are found to be most effective. And the way that they work, so one of the kind of mysteries of the personal process rule is why do they work? Because you're the one enforcing the rule. So it's kind of like who watches the watchman, right? Like who's going to enforce this? you can give yourself a pass anytime you want to give yourself a pass. So where does the power of these personal process rules come from? And what they have found is that these come from your value, your internal value of your say-do correspondence. So what say-do correspondence is, this is whether, it's kind of right there, this is whether or not you do what you say. So if you have high say-do correspondence, that means if you say you're going to do something, you're going to do something. If you have low say-do correspondence, that means that when you say you're going to do something, maybe you'll do it, maybe you won't. And the key here is that in our society, we value high say-do correspondence, right? So if you ask somebody, if somebody's asking you about your, this is reference letter season, right? So oftentimes in a reference letter, they ask about the reliability of the candidate that's applying, right? So they want you to say something about their reliability. And for the people that I work with, usually, if they say they're going to do something, they're going to do it. And I write in their letter, oh yes, this person, this candidate, when they say they're going to do something, they do it. So I told them, to submit the revisions to the draft, and they got it in, on time. When every single time we scheduled a meeting, they were there, right? Every single time they said they were going to do something, they did it. We admire that, right? We admire somebody who's like, oh yeah, this person is reliable. You better believe it. If he says he's going to do something, oh, he's going to come through. We value that. Nobody values the low say-do correspondence. Nobody values somebody where they're like, oh, what's this person like? It's like, oh, well, let me tell you. If they say they're going to do something, you have no idea, right? They will be there for you if you need them, maybe, right? Nobody says that. Nobody promotes that. Nobody values that. So we value high say-do correspondence. That's something that internally we place a value on. We have that internal psychological value. So that is exactly where the psychologists believe our willpower comes from. So when people talk about, oh, they have a lot of willpower, they don't have a lot of willpower, one of the things they say is that they have high value for their say-do correspondence, that's high willpower, or they have low value for their say-do correspondence, that's low willpower, and it works as a sort of commitment response. So basically, when you give yourself a personal rule, you are putting your high say-do correspondence on the line. And as much as you value your say-do correspondence, it is going to decrease the value of those smaller, sooner, unreliable, non-willpower goals. So I'll give you an example of this, a nice little illustration that I saw from one of my favorite shows. So this is Brooklyn Nine-Nine. If you haven't seen it, it's a sitcom that takes place in a New York police precinct. So the scene that we're going to take a look at has to do with Gina and Terry and Amy there. So the three of them decide that they're going to get into shape. They're going to clean up their diet, right? I don't say get into shape because, I mean, look at Terry over there. He does not need to get into shape. But they decided they're going to clean up their diet. And they're going to do it as a group, right? They're going to sit there and they're going to keep each other accountable, right? They're going to keep each other they're going to support each other through this process. So it's one of these diets where it's those prepackaged diets. So that's their lunch right there, and they're lying to themselves. And my favorite line, and I think it was Amy. She was talking about the lunch that she was eating, and she goes, "Oh, it's packed with nutrients." And she goes, I feel so full. Sometimes I can't even finish the grape. Like it's just too much, right? So, anyways, they're going to keep themselves accountable. So Terry is like, all right, gang, diet day 4, how is everyone holding up? And then Gina comes in and she goes, honestly, I'm gonna last forever. You hear that, bees? I'm gonna last forever. All right, so she says she's gonna last forever. She puts her say-do correspondence on the line. Right? She goes, I'm gonna last forever. And when I say something, I do it, so I put my say-do correspondence on the line. All right, so I kind of jumped the gun. You see what happens later in the day. So later in the day, she literally has, I think that's Fritos and chili. So she's eating this, and Terry yells from the other side, and he goes, hey, what happened? I thought you were going to last forever, bees. And she just goes, turns out I gave it up easy. And she yells, you hear that, bees? I gave it up so easy. And that just shows why this failed. And it failed because she doesn't value her say-do correspondence. She has no qualms whatsoever to say, you know what, I said it, and I didn't do it. So that's why this failed. So let's take a look at what's going on here. So we're back to the Ainsley-Raiklin model of self-control. And what we have here is we have, once again, your typical willpower curve here, right? So we got our larger, later reward. This is getting healthy, eating right, getting all those health benefits. And it's a longer reward. It's going to take you longer, and it's a larger reward. It's what most people would value more. It's got a higher value. The smaller, sooner reward, that is the sandwich, the Subway sandwich with the Fritos and the chili. That's your smaller, sooner reward. So as it turns out, Gina chose that smaller, sooner reward because at the moment when it was available, it was valued higher than the larger, later reward, and that's a breakdown in willpower. What she was trying to do with that personal process rule was when she said, you know what, I'm going to last forever. I'm going to put my say-do correspondence on the line. She did that. And what that does is it takes the value of your smaller, sooner reward, and it says, all right, if I take this smaller, sooner reward, then this is a lie. And I give up my say-do correspondence. So if my say-do correspondence is worth enough, then it's going to take this smaller, sooner reward, and it's going to decrease the value of it. Because the value of it is the value of that sandwich minus the value of your say-do correspondence, basically the value of your reputation. So if that was the value, right, if her say-do correspondence was worth a lot to her, then it would have pushed this smaller, sooner reward of going off the diet low enough so that when she saw that Subway sandwich with the Fritos and the chili, she would have said, you know what are they going to think about me? You know, I told them I was going to stay on the diet, and if I don't, that's going to, you know, ruin my reputation. And my reputation is worth a lot, so I'm going to stay on my diet over here. Now, if you've ever watched the show, you know that for certain things, Gina is her own person, and she just doesn't care. She doesn't care what other people think, in some cases. And that's why, in this case, it didn't push it down far enough. So when she said, hey, I'm going to last forever, later in the scene, she's like, you know, it turns out I gave it up easy. Turns out that my say-do correspondence really wasn't worth that much to me. Didn't push it down far enough, and that's why she chose to have the sandwich and gave up the diet. So this only works, this move only works, this staying accountable only works if your say-do correspondence has enough value where it's, you know, the decrease, the commitment response, devalues that smaller, sooner reward. And the most extreme example of this, and this was in your textbook, but I don't think I've ever come across a better one, was Gandhi. And Gandhi, for some reason, I'm not sure why, but for some reason, made a vow of to be sexually abstinent while he was married. So he made a vow to be sexually abstinent, a vow, right? While he was married. So for whatever reason, he had a larger later reward of maintaining sexual abstinence. He is married though, which means that he has a potential partner with him basically much of the time. So we have that smaller, sooner reward of engaging in sexual activity. So he knew that if he just wanted to stay sexually abstinent, and he did not make that statement, he did not make that vow, he knew that eventually, you know, it would be Friday night and you know, the wife is around and everybody's in the mood and she's available, and he would have said, you know what, I don't know why, but I really wanted to stay sexually abstinent. That was my large later reward. But, you know, there's the wife, so let's do it. I'm sorry, the only reason I could have thought that just popped into my mind, I don't know if I should say this, but I'm going to, is if this is November 1st and this is November 30th. All right, look it up on Google if you don't know. All right, so anyways, so he knew that by himself he wasn't going to be able to keep that vow. However, when he made that vow, when he made that public vow, when he basically told everyone, you know what, I'm going to be sexually abstinent, what he was doing is he was putting his say-do correspondence on the line. And because he is a public figure, because he inspired you know, multitudes, because of his integrity, because of his basically reputation, he knew that his reputation was very important to him. And what that did is it drove down that smaller, sooner reward low enough so that at no point, you know, Friday night, everybody's ready to go, but he was like, you know what, I would, but my reputation, my ability to lead these people, my ability to inspire them, because I do what I say, is worth so much that it pushes it down to below the longer, later reward, and I can remain sexually abstinent. All right, so any questions on that? All right. So that is it for rule-governed behavior. What we're going to do now is we're going to move into biological dispositions in learning. And these are sort of like little special hiccups, little special idiosyncrasies that occur because of the way that we're programmed. So these learning principles we've seen in cases you know, throughout this semester. They work on rats, they work on dogs, they work on pigeons, they work on humans. Some of these situations are universal. So like operant conditioning works basically the same across the species. Classical conditioning works basically the same across the species. Now we're going to get into some sort of biological idiosyncrasies. And the one that we're going to start with has to do with preparedness and conditioning. So we touched on this before, but we're specifically going to take a look at taste aversion. And then we're going to take a look at operant-respondent interactions. We're going to look at sign tracking and try to answer a question about why do romantic dates always include one thing. In our society, they typically include one thing. So does anybody want to hazard a guess? What is the one thing that just about every date you've ever been on includes? Yep, food. Exactly. So just about every single date you go on is going to be food and a something, right? So it's dinner and a movie, dinner and a show, lunch at the beach, whatever it is that you go and you, well, not here, but anyways, whatever it is that you go and do, it's going to be food and a something. So why is it that it always includes food? We're going to see that it potentially has to do with sign tracking. And all of this is going to be in service of answering a mystery of behavior that is about OS. And we're going to learn about OS and introduce that idea right now. So OS, one of the sort of people that brought OS to attention is, to people's attention is this woman right here. Her name is Erika. I will not tell you her last name yet because that's a clue. But before we take a look at her story, what I want you to realize is that, number one, she's a very interesting case because outside of her being OS, she is super high functioning. So as you're going to hear in her story, she was a championship archer. She won, she won competitions, national competitions. She she's an accomplished architect. You'll see that she's very well-spoken, she's highly intelligent, but she is OS. So we're going to see exactly what that means right now, and then we're going to analyze biological dispositions in learning to see if we can answer what is working typically in Erika, what are some things that are not working very well, and maybe what are some things that are working over time in terms of her learning mechanisms. All right, so for that we are going to our computer here, and we will introduce Erika. And this is, again, better with volume.
Most of us think we know what love is. However, there is a small group of less than 200 people worldwide who feel genuine love for inanimate objects. They are known as objective sexuals. Erika Eiffel is one of the few brave enough to publicly out themselves as being OS. She spoke to us from her home in Berlin. What was the first object you can remember falling in love with?
The first object I ever loved was a bridge in my hometown. A very lovely bridge on the Sandy River, and I really didn't even think it was unusual, really, until I was a teenager. That's when the boys and girls at school started really dating, and I kind of saw that, well, okay, I'm more interested in this bridge and they're more interested in each other. This is maybe a little different. I didn't quite realize it was love until the bridge was destroyed in a flood. I mean, I was emotionally distraught. I mean, it's like, you lost a best friend, and this bridge was a true friend to me. And that's kind of the way I saw it. I saw the life of the object as valuable as that of, a person, a friend.
Over time, Erika's bond with objects has grown to include fences, iron structures, and even her archery bow, which she named Lance. Her current loves are more famous. They include the Berlin Wall and the Eiffel Tower. In 2008, Erika confirmed her commitment to objects and to being an OS person in a small ceremony marrying the tower.
Okay, so we'll pause it right there. So this is about kind of mysterious behavior where people fall in love with objects. So the same way that a typical individual will fall in love with another person, these individuals fall in love with objects. So on the one hand, it's a very bizarre behavior. In fact, they mentioned only 200 people are known in the world with this particular orientation. But on the other hand, it's so striking how typical her behavior is as somebody who does not fit what's accepted in the mainstream sexuality. So as you continue to listen to her story, look for parallels where people who are homosexual or have other orientations would have experienced. So they started right out. She's one of the people that are brave enough to come out, right? So she had to come out as OS, the same way that individuals have to come out oftentimes as homosexual. And notice that she fell in love with a bridge around the same time other individuals started falling in love. Her age group started falling in love. So her feelings developed in a sort of typical trajectory. Notice she has had many loves. She's dated around, right? Like normal, typical people do. She finally married one of the objects that she was interested in. So notice how many parallels there are, and it becomes less of a sort of like, oh my gosh, what's this person doing? And more of a, okay, they're doing what everybody else does. Why is it object? So let's continue the story, but pay attention to those parallels.
You had your commitment ceremony. What were people's reactions? Did you have guests?
Yeah, I had several people there at my commitment ceremony, and they were very happy for me because they saw that I was legitimately happy. So from happiness breeds more happiness.
How can you be in a relationship that's something that can't return your feelings?
Well, see, that's exactly it. You're implying that what I need out of a relationship is the same as what everyone else needs. You're implying that I need my object to talk to me, I need my object to show emotion, and I need my object to wrap his arms around me, those kind of things. But actually, that's not what I look for in a relationship with my other half. What I get out of this relationship is much more to me. I mean, my objects have really propelled me to find and reach higher levels. I've become a 3-time world champion, broke numerous records. It's propelled me in all directions of my life, including work.
Okay, so this is hopefully what will be typical for everybody in here. So when you do finally find your significant other, they are, this might just be my opinion, but they are supposed to help you be the best version of yourself that you can be, right? They're not supposed to hold you back. They're supposed to allow you to hit those heights. And notice that's what her objects have done to her, right? She says, oh, because of them, I'm a better person. Because of my bows, I've won all these championships. Because of, these, I've attained, success in my career. Once again, very, hopefully typical, but nothing really out of the ordinary. So if you just inserted the word husband for objects, nobody would even bat an eye if she was like, oh yeah, my husband really supported me and helped me win championships. My husband, was the reason why I was very successful in business. We'd all be like, oh, sounds like a nice guy, right? But sounds like a nice bow.
I think that people need to look at our relationships a little bit more serious and not so much that it's just like a sexual connection, because it's not about that. In fact, many people in the OS community are not sexual, and certainly not sexual by the same standards that humans apply. But I'm not exactly going to tell people how I do it, because if I share my intimacy with the entire world, I basically lessen the value.
Feel free to decline the question. Did you lose your virginity with an object?
Have I lost my... I want to answer the question, but I don't want to just give this debased answer, I have intimate relationships with my object loves. Yes. If that's considered losing virginity, then yes, I've lost my virginity to an object.
How do you communicate?
To me, communication has a lot to do with like a feeling of energy transfer. It's like, for example, I'll put it really simple. If you walk up to a cold concrete wall and put your warm hand on the wall, you're going to feel the heat being drawn from your body, and you're going to feel the cold from the concrete coming into yours as you establish an equilibrium. And to me, these exchanges of energy are actually, really important. I kind of pick up vibrations and stuff.
Do you think it might be some type of mental disorder?
You know what? I can't say yes or no. I mean, as far as, when you say disorder, that implies some negative connotation there. If it was a mental disorder, I don't think that I would have done the things I've done in my life.
I guess what I'm getting at is, how do you know that you're not simply projecting onto an object?
Oh, clearly, because if I could just project feelings into objects, then I think everyone would be doing it. If it was that easy, everyone would be making these idealistic relationships. I'm not just a freak of nature. There are others like me. And this became my quest after this, to go around and meet all the members in the OS community. I used up my entire life savings doing this, to meet everyone.
So that's a great pause. I will just kind of jump in there again. How regular this relationship feels. So, the question was, how do you know that you're not projecting, your opinions on this object? How do you know that you're not projecting your interpretation of it? And again, I think that's a bit of an unfair question, because I think that's what everybody does. And who has not known somebody in a not so great situation, or maybe themselves been in a not so great relationship, where the person says stuff like, oh well, they're actually very nice, like they're really they really care for me, and you look at them and you say, you are projecting all over this person, right? Like, that is not what they're doing. You are completely projecting your own ideas on them. That's what we all do, I think, to a certain extent. So yeah, is she projecting? Yeah, I'm pretty sure she is. Do we all project? Yeah, I'm pretty sure we all do. Once again, very typical. Big question, why objects?
Being OS affect your relationships with other people?
You know, surprisingly, when I came out, my friends were like, finally, we knew already that you were this way. We didn't have a name to call it, but we knew you were already. We're really glad to see that you're identifying and stepping out. So it's actually made my friendships better. Only one friend walked away and said, no, can't do this. It's just a little bit too, you know, on the fringe for me.
Once again, very typical experience, right? So if you've ever had a friend that came out, you know, a lot of times, because you just know the person, you know, and you're just waiting for them to feel comfortable enough to finally come out, and then you're like, oh my gosh, thank goodness, like, yes, we know. And the same thing here, and again, one friend couldn't take it, right? So who in this in that experience of having to come out has not lost some friends? Same thing here.
This was the night of the big breakout. Checkpoints across Berlin had finally buckled. For Erika, one of her more contentious loves is the Berlin Wall, an object with which she has a deep affinity. Despite this, she grappled with her feelings because of what the wall once represented.
I just kept trying to push this aside, but I couldn't. And I just have to tell people, you know, it's not the purpose of the wall, it's not the politics, it's the suffering, you know, that the wall went through. If you look at it strictly that way, the wall was misplaced in the world. Everyone hated this wall and could not accept its existence. Well, I felt that way in my life, being an OS person, misplaced in a community, a society of people who are all in love with each other.
All right, so just one more parallel right here. She fell in love with the Berlin Wall. She literally fell in love with the bad boy, right? And look at the way that she's explaining the behavior. It's like, well, you know, I don't think that really, you know, the Berlin Wall was all that bad. It was just in the wrong situation. It was just misunderstood. And if you knew the Berlin Wall the way that I know the Berlin Wall, you would come around, you would see that they're actually, I mean, insert, you know, rebel bad boy into that sentence, and it's exactly the same kind of thing that many of us, you know, rationalize as well.
For me, I couldn't stop those natural feelings. I couldn't stop the way that I felt, just as much as the Berlin Wall could grow legs and walk away from the city of Berlin and let the people reunite. This is such a 180 from what I'm used to. I'm used to being ashamed of what I am, and I shouldn't be, because A, I'm not hurting anyone by loving an object. B, I'm not hurting myself by loving an object. And C, I'm happy. I really am very, very happy.
All right, so that was the intro to Erika Eiffel. So I want to delve into it a little bit more, and just time-wise, I think this will be the bulk of what we're going to finish doing. So we're going to go now to that repository of psychological insight, which is Tyra Banks' After Dark. And she's right. Incidentally, I did make that little aside joke. I just want everybody to know I love Tyra Banks, and if there one thing I admire about her is that she has done so many amazing things, but she has also done so many things that she really sucked at, and she has never stopped. So yeah, I think we all need a little more Tyra. Just in the Me Too moment, that little extra tap on the head, I don't think that aged well. I'm hoping she knows that one.
Here we go. This show, you guys, is all about what happens after the sun goes down and the lights go out. We're calling this show Tyra After Dark. But we're going to flip it a little and start with the city of lights, which is Paris. Paris is absolutely beautiful. I started picture of me and some people actually at the Eiffel Tower. Yeah, look at that. And most people love the Eiffel Tower. They go to Paris, they visit it, they go up it. It takes forever to climb up those darn stairs, but it's beautiful. You take your pictures, and then you leave, right? Okay, would you believe that a woman fell in love with the Eiffel Tower? And then she married the Eiffel Tower. She took on the last name of the Eiffel Tower. Her last name is now Eiffel. I'm not kidding. Check this out. Marrying the Eiffel Tower. You had your last name changed to Eiffel. Okay, okay. Isn't this a little different? A little interesting? This is not a joke. She is not like trying to get press, because you know some people do some crazy things in the world and they try to get press. This is real. Okay, when we see you there marrying the Eiffel Tower, is it like you're kissing it and stuff? Like, is there like a romantic feeling that you have for it?
Well, naturally, when you're in love, there's an element of romance involved, so yeah.
So you said that you were in love with a bridge before.
Yes.
And now you're in love with the Eiffel Tower. You married the Eiffel Tower. Why don't you explain to people what this is, that this is not a joke. What is it called when people are in love with objects?
Actually, I'm what they call an objectum sexual.
Objectum sexual.
Objectum sexual.
Which is?
It's basically the orientation to love objects. We develop relationships on a spiritual, mental, and for some also a physical level.
With objects.
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever dated and loved a person romantically?
Actually, I tried, but it was so outside of my element to try to do this.
Did you ever think?
All right, so once again, very typical, right? You try once. Probably try for your mom, right? Just to give it a shot. But she tried. She tried to have a typical relationship, just didn't work.
That there was something wrong with you growing up, loving objects?
Well, actually not until I was about 14 years old, because up till then I actually thought everyone was like me.
You thought everybody loved objects. What was the first object that you were in love with as a child?
The real serious object was a bridge called Fairbanks.
Fairbanks Bridge.
Yeah.
And what was your relationship with that bridge?
Well, I saw this bridge every day on my way to school and back again, and I just felt that I drew some strength from this bridge, and I just felt there was a sense of connection, and I just developed these strong longing feelings for the bridge.
But there was a flood, and that bridge perished in the under.
Yeah, it was probably one of the most difficult things I ever went through, especially at that age. The river's water's really high, and we just crossed the bridge, and about 2 cars after that, the bridge collapsed into the river.
And you're getting emotional right now talking about that.
I don't think that anyone ever recovers from the loss of a loved one. I don't care how much time passes, the heart doesn't heal like that. I mean, you can try to put it out of your mind, but your heart always has a scar. So yeah, it was very emotional. It's like seeing someone murdered in front of you, so. Yeah.
And so you had an emotional reaction then. Did you cry? How old were you?
Yeah, I was 14 years old when I fell in love with the bridge. We had a relationship about 3 years, so it was a pretty strong relationship. It was about 17.
So you say you had a relationship.
Yeah.
Do you think that the bridge, or going even now, the Eiffel Tower, is aware of your existence?
I mean, I sense that, and I know it seems crazy for everyone to, get this idea of that, but, I've always been able to sense, some reciprocation from my objects.
Okay, for instance, the Eiffel Tower. You married the Eiffel Tower.
I did. Yeah.
So, did you propose to the Eiffel Tower? Like,
actually, she proposed to me. I know, okay. Actually, I had gone there with some friends, and I planned on photographing her with her lights on, and it was like, I kept trying to get these pictures, and then all of a sudden, I got my camera up, and her lights went out, and then I was like, oh, okay, well, all this work for nothing, and then all of a sudden, it was just like, I looked up, and she just came alive. I mean, it was like all these lights, and it was like a fireworks display, just this display, and technically, only after the fact, I learned that her lights don't do that. And it was just like this really special thing. I don't know if they were, what the purpose was, but all I know is in my heart I really felt that, you know, she was crying out, because here's this beautiful tower in Paris, and she's surrounded by all these people in love with each other, and they look at her and they go, oh, she's so beautiful, but they don't see anything beyond beauty. It's like, I would liken it to a supermodel. People look at supermodels and they see the absolutely gorgeous exterior, but do they actually think about, you know, the depth, the inside?
All right, so just really quickly pause right there. Just once again, another parallel. She fell in love with the Eiffel Tower. When the Eiffel Tower lit up, had this great huge display, basically the Eiffel Tower made a grand gesture of romance, right? Like in any rom-com, you'll have the person do the grand gesture of romance, and then the person comes around. Same thing, Eiffel Tower did this big, huge, you know, 12 dozen bouquets of roses type light display for her, and she was like, oh my gosh, Eiffel Tower, I never knew you cared. So there you go.
Yeah, but a model's a human being.
Yeah, it's true, a human being.
Yeah.
But to me, the Eiffel Tower, you know, she really resonates with me. And
so the Eiffel Tower, you call her her.
I do, and it's only because the English language restricts me to this. If I use the word it automatically deanimates the object. And
so why not say him?
I don't know. It's the sense that you know, the object. She's the grande dame of Paris.
So you feel like she's feminine. She's
right. And in the French
feminine.
language, the pronoun, you know, is la tourelle.
Yeah. Okay, so would you consider yourself to be a lesbian with your objects?
I don't think like that, actually.
Are you attracted to male objects?
There are objects that have a male presence.
Okay.
But again, it's not like you can lift up the leg on the Eiffel Tower and check to see what, you know, her
this
gender
is what you
is.
feel. Okay. Have you ever had sex with a human being?
Actually, I tried. Because I basically stayed in the closet for a really long time with my
In the closet?
In the closet, meaning that I didn't want to
show people that you had this?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I mean, I had a kind of a bad experience when I was 14, when my mother walked in on me, and I just happened to have the object I loved at the time in bed with me. I was completely innocent.
What was the object?
My drums. I used to play drums, and I just felt this longing to pull them into bed with me. And my mother woke up the next morning. My mother woke me up the next morning, and when she saw me, she just shrieked and freaked out and told me I was going to go to hell because, you know, what are you doing? And so that was.
So again, just insert homosexual teenager in this situation. Exact same reactions, exact same kind of developmental trajectories.
That's it. I mean, I went in the back of the closet, shut the door, took the key,
and threw it out. So did you try to date guys?
I did. I put on the front for quite a long time. You know, I went out and I'd be with these guys, and they'd always kind of try to push the sexual issue and stuff, and I would just say, well, you know, I'm waiting till I get married.
I understand that you were questioning your sexuality. You thought, okay, maybe I'm not attracted to guys. Maybe it's.
Right. I actually did try to date a woman as well, just because I was doing anything I could to try to fit into mainstream. Because, you know, it's really difficult. You go out with all your friends, and, you know, my girlfriends were talking about, hey, that guy is so good looking, he's so hot, and blah, 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 blah. And I couldn't say anything. It was like, you know, what was I going to say? Oh, this, you know, this bird is so sexy, and he's got really nice lines, and engineering, and blah, you know.
Yeah.
They
were
can't
like,
do
oh,
that.
no.
So I just sat there and quietly listened to them all, you know, express themselves, and I couldn't do it.
And what about your mother now? You said back then she said you were going to hell. Now you are publicly, you know, married to the Eiffel Tower, you're publicly saying that you like this bridge. What is your relationship like with her?
Unfortunately, there is no relationship anymore. I mean, I was honest with her. Before I ever came out to the public, I told her, and I said, look, you know, I need you to understand a little bit more about what, you know, I was going through when I was younger and why I was the way I am.
Okay, we have to take a break. We'll be right back.
All right, so that's part one. Let's check out part two. Oh, God.
Erika Eiffel says the only romantic relationships that she's had in her life have been with objects. She's something called an objectum sexual. She literally fell so in love with the Eiffel Tower in Paris that she had a wedding and committed to the tower for life. And I understand you have a tattoo?
I do, yeah. In fact, you know, not, you know, a conventional wedding, we would have a ring, but for the Eiffel Tower night, it's a tattoo on my chest.
Oh my gosh, you guys see the tattoo on her chest? Like in between her chest? Okay. This is a representation of.
Actually, I'm actually polyamorous, so I love more than one object. The Eiffel Tower.
We've had shows here about polyamory.
Yeah.
Where like there's a man and woman and they love like a lot of different people and they have this, it's an open relationship. So you're saying that you've had that with your object of sexuality?
Yes, in my case, but it's not speaking for everyone.
Okay, so you married to the Eiffel Tower, but open relationship.
Right, this is an open relationship.
Okay, and this is a representation of your open relationship in front of us?
Yes.
What is this?
This is actually the Berlin Wall, and while it may seem a little bit like, oh, the Berlin Wall, I kind of have a kinship with this object because this is an object I feel is misplaced in the world.
Well, this is a replica of the Berlin Wall.
This is, yeah.
And this is a piece of the.
All right, so once again, not out of the ordinary. She married the Eiffel Tower, got a tattoo of the Eiffel Tower on her. A lot of people do that. She is in love with the Berlin Wall, has pictures and representations of the Berlin Wall around her house, right? So she'll go on to explain she's not in love with that picture, just the same way that nobody I would hope is not in love with a picture of their spouse or of their significant other, but you keep them around, right? You might have it on your phone, you might have it on your desktop, whatever it is. Again, very typical.
Berlin Wall right here?
Here's an actual piece, yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So if I were to touch.
All right, that's a little atypical because people don't carry around pieces of their loved ones, but mostly typical.
Does that, do you be like hands off my man?
Maybe.
Like, no, like seriously, like is that like really like a, am I
No,
violating?
actually, because I know that your intentions are not such.
Got it.
I mean, yours is basically looking at the object for its practical purposes only, nothing beyond that. No.
Okay, let's talk about a sex. This is an awkward question for me.
Yeah, it's awkward for me as well.
Okay. So I'll try to put it mildly. So you are attracted to, you're in love with these objects, the Berlin Wall, the piece, the actual real piece of the Berlin Wall. You're married to the Eiffel Tower. Have you ever had any sexual relation with these objects that you're in love with?
Well, I'm not broken, so, I mean, I'm completely fully functioning and stuff like that. But when it comes to intimacy, I think intimacy is defined by the partners involved. And I think the term sex is kind of pretty much generic, that people get this idea in their head about it. Well, I prefer the term intimacy because then there's just stuff like, what's intimate for me might not be considered intimate for somebody else.
So what would be considered intimate to you?
Like for me, touch is very, very important. Touch, and there's also an element of smell. And
can you show me with the Berlin Wall piece?
you want me to get down and dirty with the Berlin Wall?
I would, yes. You can pick up the piece there and show us like what would be making love to that piece.
Oh, well, okay, this is...
Oh, so you would do more if we weren't on TV, like if it was private.
Actually, what it is, really, it's about this transfer of energy. It's like feeling that this object is kind of like an extension of my own being, like we're becoming one.
Okay.
And I would say that in human lovemaking it's very similar. Now, obviously, the puzzle pieces don't fit.
Yes.
So there is...
That'd be very painful.
Yeah.
Okay. Right? I know the girls are like, oh gosh.
For me, I mean, there's your body's got nerves everywhere.
Yes.
And to me, it's really about touch and kind of feeling it's okay. For example, we have good air conditioning here, and I'm kind of cold. The Berlin Wall piece is a little bit warmer. So when I put my hands on this piece, I can actually feel the transfer of temperature between me and this piece until the point where we reach equilibrium.
Wow. Okay. And you feel, you can start to feel aroused and then go further.
My
when we're
body
on
kind of
television.
reacts that way, yeah. Time, place, situation.
Now let's talk about the Eiffel Tower, because the Berlin Wall, we all know, it came down, so there's like pieces that people can actually have with them. So you can always have this with you.
Right.
Eiffel Tower, you can't have the Eiffel Tower with you. You can have a tattoo, but you can't have the Eiffel Tower with you. So, and it's far, Paris, expensive flights. What about like replicas? Like, I love Vegas. And they have the Eiffel Tower hotel, the Paris hotel. Can you go there and be like, and go into that Eiffel Tower restaurant and feel connected?
Actually, no, not really.
Epcot Center,
I still try
France,
to stay connected with the
and
real
Disney?
Eiffel Tower in Paris, and I'll get up in the morning, fire up my laptop, and I'll turn on the webcam. There's a webcam.
A live
24
one.
hour, yeah. And I'll
So
show in the morning.
would the one in Vegas be like a?
So yeah, so once again, replicas, not the real thing, right? Just like a replica, a photo, an image of your significant other would not be a substitute for the real thing. And then I also love this, she's in a long distance relationship. So what's the first thing that she does every morning? She goes up, she fires up the webcam. She basically FaceTimes, with the Eiffel Tower. That's what you do, right? You're in a long-distance relationship. You go to Skype, FaceTime, whatever it is, and you spend some time with your significant other. Again, very, very typical behaviors.
Like, just like a fake.
It's not the Eiffel Tower. It's just a replica of the Eiffel Tower.
What about rejection? Could the Eiffel Tower divorce you? Could the Berlin Wall leave you?
Technically, there are those feelings. I mean, I've been in relationships with objects where it just, there was no synergy there and it just didn't happen. So yeah, I mean,
You've been heartbroken?
I have.
Because the object has left you.
Yeah, I mean, I had an object love with my bow. I'm on the U.S. national archery team.
Oh, like like bow and arrow.
Right,
The
and
bow.
we had the most perfect relationship. I mean, I'm a 2-time world champion, record holder, did all this great stuff with my bow. We worked together, we played together, slept together. We had a really
Slept together? How did you sleep with your bow? Did you sleep with your bow or did you sleep with your bow?
Well, let's just leave it at a kind of sleep with your bow.
I couldn't tell which tone
Yeah,
that
I'll
was.
leave it at that.
Okay. With us is sexologist Dr. Amy Marsh. So, Dr. Amy, when I first heard Erika's story, I thought that it was that she was joking. I thought she was doing this to get a lot of publicity. I almost didn't want her on the show.
All right, and we're going to touch on this again in biological dispositions of learning, but this right here is a great example of why you're sitting here. All right, so once again, Tyra Banks, highly intelligent. Look up the stuff that she did in modeling. She outsmarted the industry. So she knows a thing or two. And her mind goes to a certain place. And it's the sexologist, the person with the psych degree, that has to step in and say, well, that's the intuitive way of thinking of things. This is what is actually the case. So it's another nice little reminder of why good intentions and intelligence alone are not enough. It's why you're sitting in this room, to get that understanding of how learning works in order to know and get to the actual truth.
And then my producers were explaining to me that this is something that's real. Can you explain exactly what objective sexuality is?
It is very real. It's rare, but it's definitely real. And it's, imagine, we all were children once, and maybe we had great parents and lots of friends, but we still have a wonderful toy or a blanket or something.
Oh, like a blankie, how kids go crazy for their blankie.
Now, think of those feelings as a grown-up, and if you're wired to continue to respond to objects, then it will feel very natural to you. And the research I've done into this group really shows that they feel very natural and happy about this.
Wow.
And it's not for lack of other kinds of human relationships.
Does it have anything to do with trauma, abuse, sexual abuse, rape, anything like that?
That's where the intuitive, intelligent mind goes in our society. This is what a psych degree will say.
That would make you...
Not really, no. In fact, if it did, we'd have a lot more objective sexuals, because we all know quite a lot of people in trouble.
So people are born this way.
I think so. We need a little more research to know, but I think it's a question of wiring and orientation, just like heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual.
Got it. How many objective sexualists do you know?
Personally, I know quite a few. I've actually spent my entire life savings traveling around the world to meet all the different ones, because for them, I'm often the first person they've ever met
That has it and will speak publicly. I know at the break you were talking about that you're happy to be here to speak to them. That's what you're here
Exactly,
for.
that's what it's for. I mean, this is not about, I'm a 3-time world champion. I won the championship in martial arts as well, and I became a celebrity in Japan. It's not about media for me. I mean, this was a chance that I could come out and tell my story, reach out to people that, are otherwise sitting at home thinking, wow, going through the same things I went through when I was younger, trying to put up a front, or being in the closet, not socializing because they don't dare come out with their orientation. And I had this chance to reach out to them and say, hey, you're not alone.
Do you have a website?
I do have a
Okay,
website.
well, go to tyreshow.com if you feel any kinship to Erika in these issues with objective sexuality, and we'll link you to her site. Thank you.
All right, so that was Erika Eiffel. And we're going to wrap it up and try to solve this mystery next time. But as you can see, I mean, it was very typical behaviors. However, they were directed at objects. And the psychologist mentioned that, it has to do with some sort of wiring, some sort of differences in wiring. We're going to suggest and take a look at theories that suggest that it has to do with differences in wiring that affect how you learn and affect biological dispositions for how you learn. But if you are interested, and we just don't have the time right now, but in between now and next class, this is the website that they were talking about. It's called The Red Fence. is for Objectum Sexuality International, and it has info on a bunch of different individuals, what their loves are, and just other information about what it is that Objectum Sexuality is all about. So next time when we come, we will try to solve this mystery and look at other biological dispositions in learning. So before we go, any real quick questions or comments? All right, so that is it for today. We'll see you all next time.